We're talking about school safety. That's next on Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstadt, Cashman Equipment, and additional supporting sponsors.
Well, welcome. I'm Kip Ortenberger, and thank you as always for joining us this week on Nevada Week. Well, we all struggle with some of the most recent and devastating school shootings we've seen across our country, and it's hard not to wonder if a school somewhere in Nevada might fall to a similar fate in the future. But the risks and the threats to school safety go much farther beyond just physical violence. Hate threats and bullying, even simply not feeling safe in school, affect many of Nevada's students right now and could have lasting effects. We've got a very good, diverse panel here to examine this safety issue and its challenges and its solutions from all angles. Please welcome Senator Joyce Woodhouse, Nevada State Senator, Akiko Cooks, parent and co-founder of No Racism in Schools, Dr. Tammy Malich, Assistant Superintendent at the Clark County School District, and Sergeant Brian Zink from Clark County School Police Department. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tammy, I want to start with you. Just perspective and scope of what we're talking about when we're talking about school safety. What is the primary focus?
So I think there's been a big shift in focus. Historically, school safety was really around behavior and physical safety. Schools, as a result, focused on addressing behavior. We did that a lot through zero tolerance and pushing kids that we saw as a threat out. Historically, then we saw this shift. We started looking at, not just here in Clark, but across the nation, at what is causing kids to feel unsafe or what is causing these threats and these actual acts. And then the shift focused to restorative measures, looking at the mental health, looking at the trauma, trying to address the root of the behavior instead of punishing the behavior. If we can change the behavior, then we can change the landscape. So the shift in Clark as well has been a shift in focus to, instead of just consequencing kids, sending them home, trying to get at the root of the problem to solve the problem.
And are we talking about bullying fits into this, potential violence fits into this, racist threats fits into this, correct?
Sure, absolutely, all of it. And I think today's kids, it's compounded because our kids, who are our most valuable, precious resource in the state of Nevada, have many challenges that many of us did not grow up with as kids. Social media, electronic media, kids are on their cell phones often, and it's much easier for kids to pose a threat, to bully, to be unkind through a nameless, faceless fashion, through a social media, through an account where I may or may not even have to attach my name to it. And so I think all of that plays into the ease and ability, as well as you can push it out to a large audience in a matter of seconds, a threat or an unkind comment, a racist statement. And so I think all of that compounds safety today.
Yeah, Sergeant Zinko, we're talking about how these threats are transmitted, and most of it is social media. It's not like patrol cars are going around and they're able to identify this.
Right.
How difficult does it make then for your job to kind of intercept what is going on here?
It does make it difficult, and as Dr. Malich alluded to, one message between two friends can very quickly spread throughout a community, throughout the valley. And so we are, we do have issues with combating that, but we do have resources within the valley. We do work very closely with the Fusion Center, which is the clearinghouse for all crime or police-related threat type information in the valley. And so we work very closely with the folks up there to where we can in some cases, very quickly identify who sent out that message and then take the appropriate law enforcement steps we need to take. And then other times it may take a little bit more time because of, depending on how it's sent out, that we do get federal agencies involved, and they help assist with those type matters.
Now, at least in the news, and it might be anecdotal, but in the news we've seen quite a few threats recently that have had some relation to violence. When you're looking at the data, are you seeing upticks in the amount of threats that we're actually seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. There has been an uptick in it, and a lot of it is because of social media. Before, it would be a phone call, hey, there's a bomb or there's something at your school, and the caller would hang up, and sometimes that was easy to trace because it went from a landline to a landline. But now with social media, and there are websites and there are phone apps and things like that that are out there that people can spoof. It can go through a third-party company, outside of the country, which makes it difficult for us then to track where that threat came from. Yeah. So definitely we have seen an uptick because, again, like Dr. Mal said, every kid, probably out of the 320,000 kids in the district, 75% of them or even more possess a device of some kind. Right. And that's why we really rely on our parents in the community. It's just not the school's responsibility to monitor this type of behavior. We always ask the parents every year, several times throughout the year, talk to your kids about what's okay to post online. Make sure they understand what they say, what they post. When they hit send, it's going to have consequences. It can be very dire, and and like I said, it can spread throughout the community very quickly. So it's very important the parents understand that.
And Akiko, you're not only a parent, but you're also a community advocate as well. Yes. on these types of issues. When you're talking to the parents and you're talking to their children as well, what is the climate on safety?
They're scared. They don't feel safe at all. They feel as if anything can happen at any time. How easy is it to get on campus? How easy is it to access our children just walking on campus? What is being done for that? Because if I can remember correctly, there was just a shooting at a school maybe a week or so ago. I don't think it was on campus, but it was close to campus. Mm-hmm. That's scary. It's very scary. And our children and the parents, they don't feel safe at all.
Senator Woodhouse, we're talking about district. Let's talk about statewide. You're the vice chair of the Education Committee. Multiple testimonials, I'm sure, on where school safety is. Can you give us an idea, just broad perspective on what are some of the key issues we're seeing at a statewide level?
Well, I think everything that we experience here in Clark County is also around the rest of the state. Washoe County certainly is smaller than Clark, but the issues are the same. It's just, less people. And I think probably the other piece looking at it statewide is the fact that our rural counties have less access to support systems. The legislation that we put up in the past of Safe Voice in helping on the bullying issue has been a great step forward. And then what we did this session on school safety is a good step forward. There's a lot of work yet to do, but I think we have to look at how we're addressing the issues of, first of all, just safety, but the fact that our parents and our children, our students in our schools do not feel safe. That is, I was a first grade teacher years ago, and to think that my 6-year-olds in my class nowadays would not feel safe coming to school. So it's imperative that we all work together to make sure that we do what needs to be done to make sure that our schools are safe, and we are making steps forward in that. But of course, there's still much more to do.
And Akiko, you have personal experience again with this. You have a son that was a target of both racial and violent threats.
Yes.
You give us some perspective on both for you as a parent, but also your son, on what the impact of that was during that event, but also in the aftermath since. Well,
it was an eye-opener. When I saw the post, I was like, what's happening here? What's going on? The impact from my son was he missed 3 weeks of school. He didn't go back. He didn't want to go back. He didn't feel safe. And the community itself didn't feel safe. It's important for the parents to be so involved as far as talking to the children and saying, the no snitching rule does not apply to you. You don't live that world. The threats echoed around the school for about a week prior to it happening. So kids were talking about it on the bus, they were hearing about it, but we can't snitch. You have to, because it could be something very, very, very fatal. Like, we don't want Columbine, and that's what was referenced in the threats. Columbine Part 2, but only targeting Black students.
And Sergeant Zink, can you give us some background on what this actual event was? This was several students that were threatening at Arborview High School, correct?
Yeah, it was primarily 2 students that were charged with the different charges that went forward. And we were made aware of the threat, I believe, on a Tuesday morning. And once, the department, us, as an agency,
Monday night.
So
I called personally.
then by Tuesday morning, did that go into Safe Voice, or was it called directly to school police, or who did you contact?
So when I spoke with dispatch Monday night, they told me that they knew they were getting the calls.
Okay.
It had been sent to Safe Voice, which went up north to Fusion Center, and then had to come back down.
Right.
That doesn't work.
It didn't work. Have there been
Well, the way that
improvements to the
the
system
Safe
since
Voice
then?
works, it has to be housed at one central location, because we get so many, and Dr. Mallett's going to talk about the amount of tips that do come into that system. But as soon as they get it, they vet it, and then they do send it down to the jurisdictions that it affects the most. So I think by 9:20 Tuesday morning, we had suspects in custody at Arborview. So once our officers on the ground got that information, I believe our grave shift officers started working on it as soon as they got the information. And then again, with that one, that's another case where we get the information, we work with the Fusion Center, we find out where the IP address is, where those text messages, were those through, I think they were through Instagram.
Instagram, yeah.
So we have to work with Instagram, and social media companies nowadays are 100 times better than they were years ago as far as giving us this information, because it's a black eye on them if that's the roadblock. It's like, well, we contacted Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whoever, and then they said, well, we can't. Privacy issues, we can't share that information with you. Well, this is what it involves. So now we are finding that they do return those subpoenas much faster. So by the time we identified who those two young men were, they were in custody, I believe, by 9:20, around that time frame, taken and driven down to juvenile, and they've gone through the court system, and they're both being punished right now for whatever aspect of whatever the court system put them through.
So Tammy, just this process, this communication process, starting with social media that's completely outside of a school, and then it of course becomes central to what you're trying to do. What kind of infrastructure then do you have now? We've already talked about what kind of infrastructure do you need then to make that action even quicker?
So I think there's some lack of perception on the system. So first of all, I want to give kudos to our state. Our state legislators did, in my opinion, in the last 3 sessions have done an outstanding job of giving us more resources at the local school level to address problems such as this. From Safe Voice legislation to mental health dollars to support our kids to the safety money, et cetera. But Safe Voice specifically, prior to Safe Voice, the only mechanism we had in place was for a parent to call local law enforcement or school district police dispatch. And then we had played the waiting game till school was back in session. With Safe Voice, the beauty is it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation. It is being manned in real time by live people at the Nevada Department of Public Safety, a law enforcement agency. They receive all of the tips, and then they push them down to the local jurisdiction. Usually the school team gets it as well as local law enforcement if it's law enforcement worthy. If not, the local school team gets the tip. And again, this is happening in real time. The school team usually gets the tip before they have access to the children to do anything. So if it's bullying, let's just say, they've got the tip. When school starts the next day, they already know the contents of the tip so they can begin the investigation. In the old days, we would wait till a parent was able to come in and report that to us, or hope that a kid feels comfortable enough to go report it. Now we have that mechanism. If it's a law enforcement matter, it's even more timely because it goes to the police. They can start working on it before school's in session. So before the school team has even started taking action, either our school district police or local law enforcement is already on it. They've already done a safety check. They've already been to the home. They've already started questioning individuals in relation. We also have our mobile crisis team in Clark looped in. So if it's a mental health concern, a self-harm threat, we have a team that gets that information immediately, so they are prepared to address it in real time. So I think that's been huge.
Yeah, and let's talk about that intervention too on the flip side, on the victims of some of these crimes as well. Senator Woodhouse, one of the things that has been covered in legislation, and we did have a statewide task force, safety school task force. One of the recommendations they had was to increase social workers and mental health care, both for prevention but also for victims. Why is that so critical then to this discussion?
Well, I think, Governor Sandoval had put together the school safety task force when he was in office, and it was the task force was made up of the professionals in those various fields, as well as educators, business people, school district administration, Department of Education, as well as law enforcement. And you know, though all of those collective ideas came in, people who, this is the job that they do, and these are the things that they worry about. So when those recommendations came into the legislature in February of 2019 for the 80th session, then we were able to address what they had identified as the really most important pieces. And, you know, I would say the mental health part, social workers, the infrastructure of our school facilities, and then additional either school police or school resource officers. All of that was funded through the budget, as well as 2 bills, in order to make sure that we covered all of the areas that we could possibly cover, with funding going out to the Department of Ed and then to the school districts.
Now, that the recommended budget, initially Governor Sandoval's and then Governor Sisolak's budget just on school safety was cut approximately by $30 million. What were the reasons then for those cuts?
Well, I disagree that it was cut by $30 million. What happened was, as the legislature started, and we started going through Senate Bill 89, as well as the budget where the governor had put various areas, we did not know what we were going to be directed to use via the Economic Forum, because we don't have that data until May 1st. So as we did all of the hearings on school safety as well as everything in K-12, we were looking at when could mental health workers and social workers and more school police officers come on board. So as we went through, some funds were shaved off. But then after the forum happened on the 1st of May, we knew then that we were going to have more funds. So we went back through, and before we closed those budgets, we added money back in, as well as we put additional dollars in Senate Bill 555, which was the K-12 budget, and Senate Bill 551, in order to address all of the areas that both Governor Sandoval's recommendations and Governor Sisolak's budget had in place. So the budget that we passed was $75 million, and we put that $30 million back in.
So we haven't had any reductions, or how is there an area where we're looking at maybe the 81st legislative session we're looking at we can really bump up where funding is?
Well, I think definitely there's probably areas where we need to. I know that we certainly do not have enough social workers and mental health individuals to assist. I know particularly the Clark County School District needs more school police officers. But one of the things that we also did was we added some funds for monitoring and evaluation of the programs that we put in place. The Interim Finance Committee over this interim will be watching that. The school districts and the Department of Ed will be bringing recommendations back as to what the further needs are. And so that's the first thing we have to do. What is working? What do we need to change? What do we need to add? Did we fund something we don't need? That's probably not the case, because I'm sure it's all necessary. But, you know, it's one of the things that as legislators we have to look at.
And as you mentioned, social workers is a big area. Yes. The RJ just had an article talking about some of the gaps. The recommended gap, at least according to the Review Journal, is 250 students to 1 social worker. By their statistics, Clark County itself is over 1,000 to 1. I mean, Tammy, is that a realistic gap that we can close? I mean, that's just a phenomenal amount of funding we would need.
I believe that is a gap we can close. Prior to 7 years ago, Clark County had 20 social workers for 300,000 children. That's unrealistic. In the 2013 session, the governor's budget included the first round of social worker funding. Clark County got a big portion of those dollars, and we started ramping up social workers and other mental health professionals. The next session, those dollars carried again. They didn't carry over, but they reappropriated those dollars again for us to fund those positions. The safety grant increased or enhanced the ability for social workers. Right now, today in Clark, we have over 200 social workers. So in 5 years, we have increased from 20 to over 200. We also have shown principals that this is not a luxury position. This is a necessity on every school campus. We will not rest. The social workers are on my team. We will not rest until we have social workers in every school, and we will continue to look for funding streams. In the safety grant, Clark asked for 80% of the dollars. We did not get that. We got significantly less. We got about a third of what we asked for. So we will add 33 more schools onto our social worker school list, but we will still have about 150 schools with no social worker. We're covering them through referrals, et cetera, but they need boots on the ground at the school level. Right. And that is, I don't want to be disrespectful or not be thankful for that or appreciative. I so appreciate it, but we do need more, and I think there's always going to be a need for more.
Right. Akiko, let's go back to the parent aspect of this. And you have advocated parent inclusion, and parents are part of the solution here when we're looking at kind of systematic reform. That is also something that was recommended in the task force's recommendations as well. Where do you see the role of parents in improving school safety?
Parenting is everything. When our children are in school, our teachers are sort of like co-parenting with us because they have our kids for 8 hours a day. So that needs to happen. We need to communicate. We need to talk to our children. We need to tell them that's wrong. Talk to them about bullying. Why is it not okay to bully? What are the consequences? The two boys that were at Arborview were totally baffled, like I was wrong, because the conversation didn't happen with them. And it needs to happen. The parents are the leaders in the home. So you need to lead your children to do right, to make good decisions, to stand up against bullies, to say, no, don't do that, even if it doesn't have anything to do with you.
And I understand, too, identification, too. Let's go back to the Arborview event here, that it was the parents that actually saw the Instagram posts first or oversaw them, and then that actually led to communicating with the district. Is that correct?
I actually saw the post Monday night and sent it out via social media. Right. Crying the whole time. My problem was when I got to school Tuesday morning, children were running off of campus because they hadn't been arrested yet. School starts at 7:10. Children were on campus. Yep. Parents were calling their kids saying, leave, because they heard about the post or whatever. I mean, people from out of state were inboxing me like, is everything okay? What's going on? So, and I understand that Clark County specifically has probably never dealt with something like this. So No Racism in School is solution-based, and we want to be a part of the solution to help. Our children, the 9 victims, actually never got a referral or spoke with a counselor or therapist for like 3 weeks. So one of our demands was to create some type of mobile unit for victims. Go to their homes, right. Talk to them, make sure they're okay, make sure their parents are okay, because I literally lost my mind for 6 weeks, what's going on?
Sergeant Zink, just the communication aspect of this, and we're running out of time, and when you're looking at that one thing that can really change, and here we're dealing with a communication issue, and I'm sure we don't want to cause panic in a situation like this, but what can we do to improve kind of how we get from threat to actually then managing something like that at a school?
Well, the key thing is that for people in the community to report as soon as possible. And it's not just don't use Safe Voice, just don't call dispatch, just don't call 911, just don't call 311, just don't use Facebook. You can use all of those, because the more people that are made aware of the threat, then we can get involved quicker, because like we said, if you call dispatch and give that call to dispatch, then that should trigger a call for service, which means we're going to start investigating it. And then we routinely have parents that will send our dispatcher screenshots of text messages, and things like that, so that we have it, so that once it goes up to Safe Voice, while we wait for that information to triculate back down, we already have it. And so the key thing, like we hit on earlier, it's just for parents to take an active role in what it is that their kids are doing online. I routinely have to remind my son when he's playing video games through Xbox or whatever with friends, watch what you say, because it's just not you and your friends that are possibly hearing what you're saying. It could be other kids at your school that are involved in that game too, if it's a multiplayer game. You have to watch what you say. You have to watch because once you hit send, there's no taking that back. Once that message is zapped out into cyberspace and then onto devices, you've you've possibly committed a crime. Because once that threat's there, it's there, and there's no saying, I was kidding. You may have been kidding, but when her son gets that message, it's how he feels, how she feels, how it affects that school. And that's the big thing that a lot of the kids don't understand, is when you put a threat out there, if it affects everybody at the school, just not the targeted. Because like she said, parents were pulling their kids out of school because they didn't feel safe. And to hear that, it's terrible. None of us in this room want the kids to go to school and not feel safe. Right. That should be one of the safest places. They should feel safe at home. They should feel safe at school. And we really work very hard on getting that information out and making these schools safe.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And thank you so much. We're out of time, but thank you so much for being here and sharing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, as always, for joining our discussion on Nevada Week. Please visit our website to watch this episode again or access resources that we've discussed on the show. Also, if you have a topic or an issue you'd like us to explore on a future Nevada Week, we'd love to hear from you. So please find us on social media or email us at nevadaweek@vegaspbs.org. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next Nevada Week.